We're at the Houses of Parliament today because we wanted to bring this important issue before MPs. The deep sea is a very fragile environment which is heavily fished, especially by foreign fleets in UK waters. And there is an opportunity in Europe right now to consolidate a very strong regulation which will make sure that we don't impact those very fragile, vulnerable marine ecosystems in an irreversible way. One of the measures that the European Union has put forward is to phase out the most destructive fishing gear in the deep sea, which is essentially bottom trawling and bottom gill netting. And the UK is actually the area where most of the damage is being done. Four leading UK scientists presented some very important data.
I work on deep sea fish. I have a long-term study of deep sea fish communities off the southwest of Ireland, and those studies demonstrate the powerful effects of deep water fishing on a whole range of species, including species that aren't the targets of the deep water fishery. We've also shown how the balance of species in this environment has been changing the whole structure of that fish community.
We looked at the human impact in the North Atlantic, and we found that looking at the impacts of the oil industry and telecommunication cables and the dumping of munitions and the impact of fisheries, we looked at each one individually, what the footprint was of that activity in the year 2005, and we found that the impact of deep sea trawling was orders of magnitude greater than all the other impacts put together. We looked at the cost of doing scientific research, and we found that it's hugely expensive to find information in the deep sea, and that scientists just don't know all the background information which would be needed to assess where it would be possible to do deep sea trawling.
We've been doing some research at Plymouth University looking at mapping the distribution of different deep sea habitats, particularly vulnerable deep sea habitats. And we have now used those maps to try to assess the percentage of each of the different habitats that is protected by the current bottom trawl closures. What we found is with the current deep sea bottom trawl closures that 44% of the UK's cold water coral reef habitat is protected by those closures. About 11% of the deep sea sponge aggregations are, and about 14% of the xenophyophore aggregations are. We were then asked to calculate what percentage of those habitats would be protected if we introduced a bottom trawl ban below 600 metres. And what we found was that those figures rise dramatically to around 88% of cold water coral reef protected with that bottom trawl ban, and 100% of both deep sea sponge aggregation and xenophyophore habitat protected.
I'm interested in the role that deep water fish play in capturing carbon and storing it in their bodies. And very briefly, we're able to show that deep water fishes on the continental slope capture an amount of carbon that's equivalent to 1 to 2 million tonnes of carbon dioxide every year. And that's carbon that's prevented from going into the atmosphere. So 1 to 2 million tonnes of CO2 captured every year is worth £100 million to the UK government. Now we can come up with that number by comparing the carbon capture provided by fish to the carbon capture provided by a commercial power plant. The UK government is funding development of carbon capture plants to the tune of £1 billion, and that's a carbon capture plant that will store the same amount of carbon over a 10-year period.
The negotiations are currently underway in the European Council of Ministers. This regulation, the debate, the negotiation over a new regulation is a once-in-a-decade opportunity to set these fisheries, the management of these fisheries straight. And the UK has a right and a responsibility, I would argue, under international law to protect its seabed and these ecosystems on the seabed from the damaging impacts of fisheries, regardless of who's doing the fishing. The indications are that only 12 UK vessels out of a fleet of 5,000 are actually doing the bottom trawl fishing below 600 meters. We're looking to the UK for leadership on this. The UK is in a great position to do so. And a good piece of legislation that protects the UK seabed and the EU seabed will be both a win for the UK, a win for the public, and a win for the rest of Europe as well.